The following podcast is a Jill Devine Media production.
I have boys that are 13 and almost 11. He'll be 11 in February, and we're on a tech detox. It's so interesting to watch these boys because they're happier, they're more articulate, they communicate better, just everything is better. But it's interesting because they're off technology, they have more time on their hands, which means they have more time to be creative. So they're painting and, building with their Legos and building forts and doing all this fun stuff that they weren't doing because they were engrossed in like Minecraft.
Two Kids in a Career is brought to you by Blondin Real Estate. They're a family-owned boutique-style brokerage with over 40 years of experience serving the counties that surround St. Louis. See the properties they have to offer at blondinrealestate.com. That's blondinrealestate.com. Hi there, and welcome to Two Kids in a Career. I'm Jill Devine. As an entrepreneur, wife, and mama, the daily grind of trying to build a business while taking care of kids and trying to maintain a healthy connection with my hubby, it's a lot. With this podcast, you're going to hear candid conversations with other moms, parenting experts who can share their knowledge and insight, or you'll just hear me rambling to get it all out. There's going to be tears, there's going to be laughter, but most importantly, there will be support. Take a listen and connect with me so we can grow and learn from one another. This is Two Kids and a Career. Welcome to the launch of Season 7, Episode 100. In my head, there's like fireworks and noises going off. Episode 100, whoa, yay! So that's what's happening for me as I'm recording this, and I hope you can visualize that and hear it for yourself. But thank you so much for your support and for really helping me get to episode 100 of Two Kids and a Career. This episode, since it is such a special episode 100, I thought, well, it might be nice to have a professional on to talk about some of the stuff that the kids are doing to drive us mamas batty. and also in a serious conversation as well that'll make sense in just a minute after I introduce my guest to you. So I will say that it's been a long holiday break. My kids, they got off of school. Their last day was Friday, December 17th, and they just went back today, January 5th. So a lot of different things have happened in these last 2 weeks, and a lot of things could potentially happen as the kids are back to school. I know I'm fast forwarding things for the kiddos and myself, which I shouldn't do, but I always like to be prepared, which is why I have Kristen Creran on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 100.
I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you are a licensed professional counselor. You are a certified teacher for K through 6 and school counseling for K through 12. So if the listener can figure it out already, we are going to talk about back to school, some behavioral situations, and how we can help, because you really have the grasp on this as far as you're like, I don't know, maybe no,
Sure
you do. That sometimes these things that happen to our kiddos, we don't understand that it means something else, that there's something else happening. And one of the things that I loved when I went on your website, which, by the way, the counseling group that you have is Greenway Therapy. But when I went on, it said even children in very loving families can experience emotional difficulties. And I think that there's this assumption that when you place yourself, but even more so your child, in a therapy situation, that they just have a messed up home life and that they just, it's just bad. And so that's why I really wanted to get you on, because I think, and maybe you can help me understand this a little bit more. We are seeing more adults talk about going to therapy, which I think is great. We need that. And it's such a beautiful thing. Children Not so much, but when I hear a parent talk about it openly, I'm like, yes, hallelujah. Thank you for being brave and talking about that, because more parents, I feel, will be inclined to contact people like you. So, oh, Kristen, where do we start here?
I think you had a really good start. I'm so proud of you. Like, everything that you just said demonstrates to me, like, what a deep person you are. And one
Oh,
of the main things is that really understanding how to ask the question, what's really going on here, whether you're dealing with your kids or yourself.
yeah.
And that is actually one of the top 5 things that I teach people to identify, because once you identify that, you can actually do something about it. You know, it's very rare that your kid is just being super naughty and they just have no respect. You know, there's, especially with kids, there's something else going on.
Before we get into those particular things, can we get a little bit of a background on you, Kristen, and what has led you to where you are right now?
Oh, yeah. So, you know, it's funny. I personally specialize in complicated families. We have other people that work at Greenway Therapy that specialize in other things, but I specialize in complicated families because I came from one.
Okay.
So I got I love kids. So I initially got my degree in elementary ed, and then I went and got my master's in counseling, which included school counseling, because I like working with kiddos and families. And I realized that being in the schools tied my hands. I couldn't actually do real therapy and really make as big of an impact as I wanted. So I went ahead and did the extra hours for community counseling so I could work hand in hand with families and with their children. But because of my history, I mean, that's how I was drawn to it. I talk about this a lot. I'm actually a love child, which means my parents had an affair, and I was the product of it. So my family is the family tree is very complicated. So I have personal experience with working with the clients that I work with. So it gives me very unique perspective on things. So,
Well, that
um,
was what I was gonna ask. What do you define as a complicated family? Okay.
blended families are families where one parent is incarcerated or they're just MIA. Um, Divorced families, you know, anything in that realm. You
Okay.
know, but there could be a variety of things that's going on, and a lot of it has to do with like dealing with conflict between the parents and how that affects the kids. And most of the work we do with kids really involves coaching the parents on, you know, how to parent and how to identify, like, okay, what's going on with my kids? Their grades are dipping, or they're having behaviors or something like that. Oh, it has to do with our conflict. It's not actually like a defect in our child. If we reduce conflict, then my child's performance and mood and all of that will increase.
One thing that came to mind when I knew I was gonna talk to you is, as I mentioned, we are still in this weird spot where we're not talking about mental health and getting the help that we need as much as we should. It has improved.
Yeah.
I see stuff on social media from celebrities that I'm like, yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing this up. Um, but w- one thing as parents or just even individuals, we don't necessarily know the terminology. We don't know. You hear about a psychiatrist and you hear about a therapist, but that's not necessarily what you are supposed to go to or who you're supposed to go to. And I bring it up because I have had a guest on a couple of times. Her name is Erica Komisar, and she was on episode 37 and episode 91. She's a clinical social worker, a psychoanalyst, and a parent guidance expert. And in episode 91, I believe, I maybe it was in both episodes, she talked about the difference between a psychologist and a psychoanalyst. And I know that you guys special in psychotherapy, and I was wondering if you could even talk about that a little bit more, because something that she mentioned was, like, if you go to your pediatrician with your kid and you're just like, can you go ahead and figure out what's happening with my kid and
Been
what
there.
what these emotions are like? No, they
Mm-mm.
should refer you out to the appropriate person, but there is a very big difference between a psychoanalyst and a psychiatrist and all of that. So, could you dive into that a little bit for me?
Yeah, man, that that whole situation is very familiar. Like before I was a therapist, I had my children, and my older one, needs a little bit more support than my younger one, and we did go to the pediatrician, and they didn't have much to say. They're like, "Here's a name," but I got referred to some like 20-year-old counselor who doesn't have kids and doesn't have experience, and I'm like, "What?" I went to one session, I'm like, "What is she gonna have to say to me?"
Right.
So, like, the market is very confusing. We actually we include in our paperwork an explanation of the different types of therapists that we have on staff, and kind of like generally what you'll see in the community so people can really understand who they're working with. So let's see the differences. I'm a licensed professional counselor, which means I have a master's level degree in mental health. And I had to do 3,000 hours of service before they would give me my license. And that included supervision for about 2 years. A lot of people do their work in like a non for profit. There's a small percentage that do some of their hours in a private practice or at a hospital or something. And then, like, your psychologists are PhDs. So that means basically, they're doing the same kind of work that I'm doing, except they've have 2 more years of education than I do. And they've done dissertations and research projects, and they're more like academic type people, which, maybe gives them some more knowledge, maybe doesn't. I've been to PhDs, I've been to people that aren't licensed, I've been to licensed professional counselors, and, maybe your PhD isn't as helpful as your licensed professional counselor. It really just depends on the person and their background. So, like, my best advice is to interview who you're talking with. And even though there's kind of that power imbalance where the person that you're looking for is seen as the expert, still ask them, make sure that they are the expert in what you need, ask them what their experience is, not just in their education, but like their clinical experience. What kind of clients do you typically work with? What drew you to being a therapist? Do you have a success story you can share? And if you're looking for medicine, typically you will go to your general practitioner or a psychiatrist. But sometimes those people also offer therapy too. So, you just have to do your due diligence and make sure you're getting what you need from these people, because we're not all created equal, even regardless of licensure.
There's a part of me that wishes that I would have had you on before the holiday break so that I could say, "How do I prepare for when the girls go back to school?" And, but I thought, it's good to always have this stuff in your back pocket, and maybe it's one of those things that talking to you now, it will help me be on the lookout for different things that they might be going through. Now, I will say for me and my situation, I have a 3 and a 5-year-old. I know for them, a lot of it's tiredness. I mean, they're gonna be just exhausted coming back to school after a 2.5-week break. And then that also is in the summertime too. But there are kiddos that are older that a change is really difficult. I think that a lot of kids love structure. They may not admit it, but they do. I was wondering if we could talk about that a little bit now, getting back to school. I mean, there's so many different factors too. I think it's probably even more challenging for you right now, Kristen, take that into one bucket, but then you still add COVID and mask and all of this different stuff with technology, and that's another bucket. And combine the two, it's like, wow, what do we do? So, oh man, yeah.
There's a lot of like modern day society kind of like overstructures things, and I think COVID has perpetuated that more. There's more structure around how you have lunch and where you have lunch and what you can do and your mask, and there's so many rules, and it affects every kid different, and they don't often talk about it with you. But at our house, as far as like managing like the emotions over vacation and then moving back into school, like I try to keep as much of the daily routine intact as possible, so that when the kids are going back to school they don't experience such a swing in mood and behaviors and all of that. So like waking up at 6 a.m. isn't quite a shock, and having to have breakfast and lunch and dinner at a certain time isn't quite a shock. So that's one thing that I suggest, because you're right, kids do thrive off of structure, even if they may not want it. Their brains want it.
Mm-hmm.
Structure equals security, but too much structure kills creativity. So you have to find this fine balance.
Oh, great, Kristen. What do I do then?
Oh, it's so hard. There's so
Ah,
many so many systemic things that contribute to this. Yeah, so like having structure time is important, but also having free time is important. And actually, again, I have boys that are 13 and almost 11. He'll be 11 in February, and we're on a tech detox, and it's so interesting to watch these boys because they're happier, they're more articulate, they communicate better. Just everything is better. But it's interesting because they're off technology, they have more time on their hands, which means they have more time to be creative. So they're painting and building with their Legos and building forts and doing all this fun stuff that they weren't doing because they were engrossed in like Minecraft. So I think that's why they're happier, is because their brains are allowed to be creative, and that seems to help their mental health a lot.
before we continue this conversation, I would like to highlight one of the very first sponsors of the podcast, Blonde in Real Estate. And they continue to support me, which just is an amazing feeling in itself. But it's so easy to support Blonde in Real Estate because of all that they do for small businesses and what they're doing to improve their business on the daily. So as you know, the market has been crazy and it continues to be crazy. And one of the things that really struck me with Blonde in Real Estate, a lot of the things that they are doing and have been doing are things that other real estate agencies kind of had to play catch up with over the last year or so. We hit a pandemic, a lot of stuff went straight to virtual, and it was hard to sell homes or buy homes in that situation. But Blonde in Real Estate was already ahead of the game on that. And you will see firsthand when you visit blondeinrealestate.com all that they can offer you. Another great thing, when you go to blondeinrealestate.com, you can sign up for this feature where you learn about properties before they hit the market. And those are the properties that are selling. That's how people are getting the home of their dreams. So head blondeinrealestate.com to sign up for that feature. Now let's get back to this week's conversation. Let's go there. The tech detox for the parents that are listening right now. Like, all right, how do you do it? What do you do? How do I manage? Walk through that, because that has to be challenging in itself, but also rewarding once it's done, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for all the parents that have really young kids, I would say don't let the genie out of the bottle too early.
Yeah.
Put restrictions in place on the front end. Um, which I think is easier to do for you guys that have younger kids because
Yeah.
technology isn't like a new thing. Whereas when my kids were little, iPads were just coming out. And it was like, oh my God, here's this cool thing. Oh, my kid can play with this. Oh, this is so great. And then it's like, oh no, maybe we got a little too carried away. And now this kid is like, my iPad. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, we just took it away. And
Did you have a
you know,
conversation about it though? Like, hey,
yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah. We had a conversation about it, and I was like, "Here's the deal. I, we're obviously struggling, and these are the expectations in the house. These are the things that aren't being met, and it seems like you're having a hard time like respecting the boundaries that we've put in place. So we've put like timers on their phones, and we have like a structure around when they can get on tech and when they can't, that really limits their time, and they're having trouble respecting that, which I could see why, because they're like children. So I basically took away the need to have all those boundaries and, explained it to them. And, I was like, what we'll do is when we start seeing these expectations being met in the house, then we'll slowly give you back some of your privilege. And the idea for me and my husband is to like refocus them.
Mm-hmm.
They were overdoing it, and they were really obsessed with getting on their tech, and so we're going to have this extended period of time to where they refocus on like, oh, I really like baking, or I really like drawing, or whatever, and that I want that to become more important to them, at which point I'll give them their phones back. And if they can't respect the boundaries again, then I'll just take it away.
I totally appreciate that. I know that it's hard as a
It
parent.
is.
It really is because there can be yelling and screaming and crying, and I'm sure certain words are said,
Hmm.
but I can't say that I have ever heard of a situation where that boundary was put in place and the child did not benefit from it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. They need
Yeah.
it. They need it. And that's why, as your kids grow, if you have smaller ones, put the apps on the phones and get the regulatory software. And they have amazing software now where you can basically watch every move that they make on their tech, as you should. Children do not need privacy. They need supervision.
Mm.
You
Mhm.
wouldn't drop them off in the middle of New York City and say, "Have at it. We'll see how you do," which is essentially putting your kid on the internet, is basically, letting the rest of the world into your home. I don't want TikTok raising my kids, that's for sure.
Well, I just recently had this conversation with some other parents because eh, I am the older parent, and I we were talking about this, and they're like, "You probably don't wanna listen to this because it's gonna scar you. It will really, truly scar you." I'm like, "No, I need to be prepared for all of it, and I wanna hear the different things that you're saying to your kiddos." And there was this conversation about something bad happening with a TikTok or a Snapchat or something, and what I didn't even think about was what they had told their child, that even though it's not you, if somebody sent you that picture, you are
Mhm.
now in possession of it, and you are
Mhm.
now part of the situation. Or if you were to take a screenshot and be like, "Can you believe that this happened?" Like, you are now part of it.
Mhm.
And that hit me like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even think to cover that. I didn't even think that that would be something to talk about." So I yeah, I need the playbook for sure, because my husband and I always joke, I'm like, "What is gonna happen when they're older, and what's social media gonna be like?"
Just
And
limit it. Don't let them on. Don't let them on. There's a therapist in St. Louis I really, really love. His name's Ned Presnell, and his practice specializes in addictions. But they do quite a lot of parent coaching, and I've heard some of his talks. And one of the things that stuck out to me that he said is that our job as parents is to be our child's surrogate prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that it makes decisions, like well thought out decisions. They don't have access to that yet. And there's an abundance of research around this, but kids can't make decisions for themselves yet, which is why we need to regulate their social media, maybe even not let them have it, and track what they're doing and check frequently and set the expectation up front that, we're going to be looking at this, which is a deterrent,
Mm-hmm.
and if something bad is happening, then we can make sure we stay in front of it.
I'd like to get into the different behaviors that parents should be on the lookout for. Things that are happening that maybe we are just like, okay, they're in a mood, or this just seems a little odd, but not too odd to where I want to do anything about it. I know that is something that you guys really, really hit on at Greenway Therapy. Like, hey, if your child is experiencing this challenge or this challenge or this challenge, they may need some additional support. And so, what would that be to where a parent would finally say, okay, I've got to make that call, or I have to do a little bit more investigating?
Goodness, Jill, actually, this just happened to me. So I'm sitting over here with over a decade of child development education. I work with families, and my own 13-year-old for 2 months had been allegedly having stomach aches and throwing up. And I'm like, what is going on? I got to the point where I called the pediatrician, had an appointment. I was looking for a specialist for GI issues. And he says, I actually caught him faking vomiting. I put my hand in the vomit and I was like, this is cold, this is not vomit. And I was mad initially because he's missed a lot of school. And I'm like, as a parent, trying to find this balance of like, okay, how do I honor what you're telling me? But also, how do I kind of look at this differently? Is there something else going on? And it was really hard to tell until I caught him, and I got mad. And finally I went into his room and I sat on his dresser and I was like, okay, man, like, you got to share.
Mm-hmm.
We have to start talking. And he's 13, and I think this is how many kids are. They either don't share because they don't have the vocabulary or the ability to express it, or like something makes them feel like they don't want to, like they'll be in trouble
Mm-hmm.
or something. So come to find out, my child is drowning at school and can't keep up. And so we've come up with a creative solution to help him with that, but it took months for him to share this with me. And so I don't think that's a unique story for many parents. And it's definitely not going to be a perfect process. But, if something comes up with your kid, like stomach aches, my kids were fake, but, they could be real.
Mm-hmm.
Stomach ache, headaches, they're in their room more. They're really avoidant of you. They're on their tech more. A lot of kids are using tech as a way to like self-soothe, which is like such a bad idea because it's just like a form of dissociation. Nothing's being solved. Their eating can change. Maybe they eat more. Maybe they don't eat enough. Maybe they just don't want to eat. Just any change that you're like, that's weird. Or is there something going on? Like, follow that feeling, go to the pediatrician and check it out if it's somatic, if it's in their body, or just, even if you just have an inkling, to set a counseling appointment. You don't have to be in crisis to go see a counselor. Just call up and say, hey, my kid needs someone to talk to. You look like a great person, and just send them. Be like, you're 13 now. You need someone to talk to other than me.
Right.
Just because. Sounds fun. Let's do that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If they're not talking to you and you don't know what to do, like, what do you do? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so hard. It's not a linear process. Sometimes I'll send my kids with my sister because she's cool, and she's casual and
Mhm.
kids like to talk to her. So you don't have to use a counselor. You can. But like involving other family members or friends that your kids really like is, call up the adult. Hey, will you come pick up my kid for a couple hours and, see what kind of info you can get out of them.
One of my best friends, her oldest daughter, who is in 8th grade, she is one of the godmothers to my youngest daughter, and we were celebrating my youngest daughter's birthday, and I don't know, she said something to me. She goes, "What do you want for Christmas?" And I said, "From who?" And she said, "From me." I'm like, "Nothing." And she goes, "Oh, I want to do something." And I looked at her and she was sitting right next to her mom, my best friend, and I said, "You know what I want for Christmas? I want you to honestly know that if there's ever anything that you need or you need to just talk or go for a walk or you need me to come get you, I am here." And she just looked at
Oh.
me and I said, because I want that to be the case, because I want that to be for my girls too. Like, if you don't feel comfortable sharing with me or your dad, like, let's find the backup. Let's find out who it is. And I want these girls to feel safe. I want them to know that they have somebody to turn to, even if it doesn't feel really like that or doesn't feel right. I am worried about that age of kiddos, and just hearing what my best friend and other friends will say about the social awkwardness because they are doing everything virtual or through their phones. Like, I just don't want any kind of tragedies. I don't want self-esteem issues, and I think that it's so important that, like you said, have that backup adult. Have someone for your child to go to and, like, let them know that.
It takes a village for a reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah, having for me that, my adults were my grandma and my big sister, and my big sister is now a person for my kids. And I think parents these days kind of feel like, I don't know, their world revolves around their kids, and I don't know, the family unit has like shrunk, and it seems like generally speaking, kids don't have enough adults to go to. And
Yeah.
I just think they need other adults. I don't care who it is, just somebody that they can go to other than their parents, because parents aren't cool.
Right. I mean, we think we are, but if I can
Maybe
be
we are.
cool to somebody else, then that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But you're right,
So
like, going to another adult that, I mean, it is a safe space, but somebody that can provide logic and reason.
yeah, and sometimes you have to create it for your kids. It doesn't always happen. Like, I really push my kids in the direction of my sister. I'm like, I call her and I'm like, "Hey, Aiden needs some clothes. Will you take them?" I
Yeah.
don't actually need her to take them. I know that it's an opportunity for them to kind of let loose, and maybe something comes up. Great.
Right. Right. It's not a You don't wanna say, like, "Okay, go ahead, and when you're taking them shopping, I need you to ask this, this, and this." If it's a natural
Mhm.
conversation and things just work, that's what matters.
Yeah, it's definitely has to be organic. It can't be an interrogation.
Well, as we wrap things up, I wanna thank you for the advice and the examples that you gave, and for those who are listening in the St. Louis area, you are based in St. Louis, and you have locations. You have 2 locations, don't you, for Greenway Therapy?
Yeah, we have one in Clayton and one in Chesterfield. So like we also have clinicians that are licensed in Illinois. So there are some people that come over from Illinois to see us at our Clayton location because it's pretty close to downtown.
And then if anybody is thinking, "Okay, I need to make that call or I need to reach out," who should they contact? Where should they go? What do they need to do? Give them all the scoop.
Yeah, so you can go to the website begintalking.com. So all of our information is on there. You can email us at admin@greenwaytherapy.com, or you can call us at 800-353-6402.
And I will have all of this information on the show notes at jilldevine.com. Kristen, thank you so much for joining me and providing your professional advice, but also your own personal parenting advice. It's always nice to hear the perspective of another mother. And before we wrap things up, I just want to say thank you to Blondin Real Estate, one of the proud sponsors of the podcast. I have to say that over the holiday break, I did a little look in at different real estate properties that Blondin Real Estate has to offer you. See, the thing that I have done is I have signed up for this feature that they have at blondinrealestate.com where I can see properties before they hit the market. And that's really how people are getting the homes of their dreams. So head to blondinrealestate.com, give them your email address, and then you'll be able to start coming up with some dreams and goals when it comes to your dream home. Again, blondinrealestate.com. And I want to thank you for your support of the podcast. I can't believe it. Again, episode 100. This is so amazing. I can't wait to see what's in store for season 7. Follow along on all the social medias. You can get all the information that you possibly need about 2 kids and a career by visiting jilldevine.com. Thank you again for your support of 2 kids and a career.